My name is Ted, and I am 68 years old. For the past 3 years, the little guest house behind my son's property has been the place I call home. After David was gone, everything changed except for my love for my granddaughter Maya. Now, a letter from the law offices of Henderson and Associates sits on my table, and my daughter-in-law Clarissa has given me an ultimatum. She says I have to leave. I know this letter is the final answer to my fate. Before we open it together, I'm genuinely curious to know where you are listening to this story from. A quiet suburb or maybe a busy city? Let me know down in the comments. And if you want to walk with me through this entire emotional journey, please hit that subscribe button. It truly helps me find the motivation to share. For most of my life, I was a high school history teacher. My wife Eleanor passed away from cancer when David was just 15. It was just him and me after that. We made it work. He was a good kid, grew into a fine man and architect. He married Clarissa. And when little Maya came along, my heart, which had felt so quiet since Eleanor left, found a new rhythm. About 5 years ago, my old house, the one full of memories of Eleanor, started feeling too big, too empty, and too demanding for a man my age. The stairs were a chore. The yard was a battle. David saw it. He came over one Sunday, sat me down at my own kitchen table and said, "Dad, this is silly. I'm building the new house on Maple Crest. There's a perfect spot in the back. Let me build you a proper place there, your own space. You shouldn't be climbing these stairs. I want Maya to grow up knowing her grandpa like I did." It wasn't a contract. It was my son's hand on my shoulder, his eyes earnest. He called it his granny flat, even though I teased him about the name. We had a handshake. It was a promise between a father and a son. The kind you think is written in stone. I sold my house. The money went into my savings, a modest nest egg for my later years. David's new house was beautiful, and my little cottage behind it was perfect. It had one bedroom, a small living area, a kitchenette, and a porch that looked out onto the garden. For the first 2 years, it was everything he promised. I puttered in the garden. I fixed things around their house. My favorite part of every day was 3:15 p.m. when the school bus dropped Maya off at the end of the drive. She'd run straight to my cottage backpack bouncing, and I'd have a snack ready. We'd do her homework, especially the history projects. I told her stories about ancient Rome and the American pioneers that weren't in her textbooks. She'd tell me about her friends, her soccer games. David would often stop by after work, still in his dress shirt, and sit on my porch. We'd talk about his projects, about the news, about nothing at all. It felt like a family. Clarissa was always polite, but there was a distance. She worked in commercial real estate, a world of deals and appearances. She appreciated that I was there for Maya, that it saved them on childcare, but our conversations never went deeper than the weather or Maya's schedule. She referred to my cottage as the guest house, or the back suite, never as your place or Grandpa's house. I didn't mind much. I had David and I had Maya. That was my foundation. Then the phone call, a highway at night, rain, a truck, just like that, the center of my world. My only child was gone. The grief was a physical weight, like I was made of lead. I moved through the days in a fog. Clarissa was shattered too in her own way. She became very quiet, very focused on practical things. For a few months we orbited each other in shared silent agony, held together by the routine of caring for Maya. The foundation was cracked, but we were still standing on it. Then about 3 months after the funeral, the atmosphere began to shift. The chill wasn't from the weather. It started with small things. Clarissa hired a landscaping company. 2 young men with loud mowers and leaf blowers showed up every week. The quiet gardening I did, which was my therapy, was suddenly deemed insufficient. "I just want it to look perfect, Ted. It's one less thing for you to worry about," she said. Her tone was sweet, but the message was clear. My role was being phased out. Then came the tutor for Maya. "Her math scores need improvement," Clarissa explained. "And with everything, I think a structured professional environment after school is best now." Maya's daily run to my cottage stopped. Now, a serious-looking college student picked her up from the bus stop and took her to the dining room for 2 hours of drills. I would watch from my window, my heart aching. The cottage grew very quiet. One evening, she knocked on my door. It was a formal knock, not the happy rap of Maya or the easy tap of David. She was still in her work suit, her posture perfect. "Ted, can we talk?" She came in, didn't sit down. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," she began, her voice carefully neutral. "This house, it holds so many memories. Some of them are just too painful. I'm considering a change, a fresh start for me and Maya, maybe a condo in the city, Something more manageable closer to my work and better schools for Maya. My stomach tightened. I see, I said. The thing is, she continued, not meeting my eyes, looking instead at a bookshelf. A move like that, the guest house wouldn't be part of the equation. It wouldn't be practical. David and I had an agreement. I said, my voice softer than I intended. This was to be my home, until the end. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were cool, resolute. Ted David is gone. That was a conversation between you two, a kind gesture. But I have to think about what's best for Maya's future now. I need to be able to make decisions without constraints. She called me Ted, not Dad. Not even Ted Dad, just Ted, like a tenant, like a problem to be solved. The agreement was that I sold my house to be here. I said, a flicker of the old teacher's firmness in my voice. And you've been a wonderful help, she said, the praise feeling hollow procedural. But things change. I need you to start looking for other arrangements. I think 90 days is a reasonable time frame. Then she placed a white envelope on my coffee table. My attorney drew this up. It outlines the notice period. It's just a formality to make things clear. She left before I could say another word. I picked up the envelope. It was heavy, expensive paper. The letter inside was full of legal terms, termination of occupancy, notice to vacate, but the meaning was brutally simple. I was no longer welcome. The promise made of love and trust had been reduced to a 90-day countdown on a piece of paper. The foundation wasn't just cracked anymore. It was being bulldozed. The 90 days felt like a siege. Clarissa started having open houses. Strangers would parade through the main house and the garden, sometimes peering into the windows of my cottage. What a charming bonus space, I heard one woman say to a realtor. Perfect for an artist's studio or a home office. I wasn't a grandfather anymore. I was a charming bonus space that needed to be vacated. Clarissa would ask me with a thin smile to make sure the porch is tidy, or suggest I take a nice long drive during showings. My home had become an inconvenience to her staging. The humiliation was a slow, constant burn. The worst part was Maya. Clarissa told her grandpa was getting his own new place soon and that she shouldn't bother me because I was very busy packing. I saw the confusion and hurt in Maya's eyes. One afternoon, I found her sitting by the old oak tree, crying silently. Hey, kiddo, I said, sitting beside her. She wiped her face angrily. Mom says we're going to move to a building with a pool. She says it'll be an adventure, but I don't want an adventure. I want to stay here, with you. That with you shattered me. I know, sweetheart, I know. Is it because Mom doesn't like you anymore? She asked, her voice small. The question was too honest, too sharp. It's complicated, Maya. Grown-up things, but no matter where I live, I will always be your grandpa. Always. But the look she gave me was one of pure betrayal. She believed I was choosing to leave her. Clarissa had framed it that way, and I was powerless to correct it without causing a gang da-day war. I felt ancient and useless. I stopped sleeping. I'd wander the cottage at night looking at photos. David as a boy on my shoulders. David at his graduation. David holding newborn Maya, his face a picture of awestruck joy. The pain was so acute it was dizzying. This was all he had built for us, and it was being dismantled. Then a lifeline from a direction I never expected. My phone rang one Tuesday morning. The caller ID said, Henderson Law. Mr. Miller, Theodore Miller, a calm older male voice asked. Yes, speaking. This is Robert Henderson. I was your son David's attorney and friend. I'm handling his estate. There is a matter I need to discuss with you, privately. Would you be able to come to my office tomorrow afternoon? Clarissa hadn't mentioned any meeting about the estate. Is this about the will? In a manner of speaking, Henderson said. His voice was careful, measured. David had specific instructions he was very adamant about. They concern you. I believe it is important we speak before the formal reading which Clarissa has scheduled for next week. Can you come? 2 o'clock. I agreed. The next day, I sat in a wood-paneled office that smelled of old books and leather. Robert Henderson was a man in his 60s with kind eyes behind glasses and a sober demeanor. He spoke of David with a genuine affection. David was a planner, Mr. Miller, a thinker. He loved you and Maya more than anything. He was also a keen observer of people. Henderson chose his words delicately. He wanted to ensure that certain things were protected no matter what the future held. The will is straightforward in most aspects, but he added a provision, a very specific legally binding provision regarding you and the cottage. My heart hammered against my ribs. What kind of provision? He called it a life estate habendum clause tied to the property deed. In simpler terms, he granted you the irrevocable legal right to live in that cottage for the rest of your life. It is not a gift from the estate. It is a condition placed upon the property itself, which passes to Clarissa. I stared at him, trying to process it. She can't sell it out from under me. No, Henderson said firmly. She cannot. And if she or any future owner tries to interfere with that, right there is a powerful secondary trigger. The financial trust established for Maya, which Clarissa controls as guardian, would immediately be placed under the control of an independent trustee appointed by this firm until Maya turns 25. David wanted to ensure there was a significant deterrent to anyone who might try to disregard his wishes. I was stunned. David had seen a future where I might need armor, and he had built it for me in legalese. Does Clarissa know? Not yet. The provision is in the will to be read aloud with all parties present. David was very clear on that point. He wanted it heard by everyone at the same time. Henderson leaned forward. My advice to you, Mr. Miller, is to be at that reading. Do not waive your appearance. Sit there and hear it. Your son left you a key. You just have to be present to use it. I left his office with a tremor in my hands that wasn't from age. It was from a surge of something I hadn't felt in months, a fragile, terrifying hope. The law office conference room was cold. The air conditioning hummed too loudly. A long, polished table reflected the sterile ceiling lights. Clarissa sat on one side, poised and elegant in a charcoal gray dress. Next to her was a sleek younger man, her personal attorney, who kept glancing at his phone. Maya sat quietly beside her mother, wearing a stiff-looking dress, her eyes downcast. She looked like a doll placed on a shelf. I took a seat on the opposite side of the table, feeling every one of my 68 years. I was an old man in a worn sport coat, facing a wall of polished certainty. Robert Henderson sat at the head of the table. He greeted everyone solemnly, then opened a leather-bound folder. We are here to read the last will and testament of David Alexander Miller. He read through the formalities. Then came the substance. The architectural firm's assets, his investment portfolio, the bank accounts, all passed into a trust for Clarissa, with provisions for Maya's education and welfare. The deed to the house on Maple Crest was transferred to Clarissa. With each item, Clarissa gave a slight, satisfied nod. Her attorney made a quiet note. This was what she expected. This was her due. Then Henderson read, "To my father, Theodore James Miller, I leave the sum of $25,000 to assist him in his future housing needs and well-being." It was a kind gesture, but in the context of millions, it was a pittance. It was a moving away fund. Clarissa let out a small, almost imperceptible sigh. It wasn't a sigh of relief, but of dismissal. She didn't look at me, but she shifted in her chair, and I heard her murmur, barely audible, to her lawyer. Well, that's that then. Enough to get settled somewhere. The words were a slap. The condescension, the finality of it. That's that. My fate was sealed with a check. I looked at my hands on the table, the veins prominent, the age spots. I thought of David's hand in mine when he was a boy. I fought to keep my breathing even. I glanced at Maya. She had hurt her mother. A flush of shame crept up her neck, and she stared harder at the table. Henderson paused. He looked around the room, his gaze lingering for a moment on Clarissa's composed face, then on mine. He cleared his throat. That concludes the primary bequests. However, there is a supplemental codicil labeled Exhibit 7C. The testator was explicit that this be read only after the main document and only with all named parties in attendance. Clarissa's head snapped up. Her lawyer stopped typing. A codicil. What is this? She asked, her voice sharp. It is an amendment, Mrs. Miller, Henderson said calmly. He pulled out another sheet of paper. It reads as follows. Regarding the real property located at 1742 Maple Crest Lane, and specifically the detached residential structure on said property designated as Unit B on the attached survey commonly referred to as the guest cottage, I hereby establish and grant a life estate in said Unit B to my father, Theodore James Miller. This right of habitation is irrevocable, attaches to the property deed, and is binding upon any and all future owners of the primary property. It shall remain in force for the natural life of my father, or until he voluntarily relinquishes said right in writing." The room was utterly silent. The hum of the air conditioner sounded like a roar. Henderson continued, his voice gaining a slight edge of gravity. "Furthermore, to ensure the integrity of this provision, should any title holder of the primary property undertake any action to obstruct, impede, or legally challenge this life estate, such action will trigger an immediate and irreversible change in the trusteeship of the Maya Eleanor Miller Educational Trust. In such event, full administrative control of said trust shall be transferred from the guardian to an independent trustee appointed by the law firm of Henderson and Associates, to be held until my daughter Maya reaches the age of 25. He placed the paper down. Clarissa was frozen. The color had drained from her face, leaving 2 spots of high, sharp red on her cheeks. Her mouth was slightly open. It took a full 10 seconds for her to find her voice. That's impossible. He can't do that. That's my house." "He could, and he did, Mrs. Miller," Henderson said, his tone now that of a judge delivering a verdict. "The documents are properly executed, notarized, and witnessed. He was of completely sound mind. The life estate is a recognized and powerful legal instrument. The cottage is legally Mr. Miller's home for life. You own the land it sits on and the main house, but you cannot sell it, rent it, or inhabit it without his voluntary departure. Attempting to do so would have severe consequences for your control of Maya's trust." Her composure shattered. She stood up, her chair screeching back. "This is a conspiracy! You and him!" she shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me, then at Henderson. "You tricked David. He would never lock me out of my own property." "Mom, stop!" Maya whispered, tears in her eyes, tugging at her mother's sleeve. Clarissa's lawyer was on his feet now, his face pale, quickly scanning the document Henderson had passed to him. He leaned in and whispered urgently to her, his words a frantic hiss. I saw her expression change from fury to a dawning, horrified comprehension as the legal reality he explained sank in. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a wave of profound, almost sorrowful awe. My son from beyond the grave had just reached out and placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. He had built his final, most important structure, a fortress of paper and law to protect his father. The aftermath was chaotic but brief. Clarissa was led out of the conference room by her flustered attorney, still sputtering about appeals and contesting the will. Maya stayed behind for a moment, looking at me with wide, confused eyes, before being ushered out after her mother. Henderson gave me a folder containing copies of all the documents. "Go home, Mr. Miller," he said quietly. "It is your home. Go home." The drive back to Maple Crest was surreal. The familiar streets looked different. I wasn't returning to a place of impermanence and pending eviction. I was returning to my home, a fact now backed by the full weight of the law and my son's foresight. Clarissa did not come home that night. She took Maya to a hotel, her lawyer told Henderson. For 3 days, the big house was dark and silent. I stayed in my cottage. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel victorious. I felt a deep, weary sadness for the entire mess, for David's absence, for Maya's distress, for the bitter woman Clarissa had become. I knew a stalemate when I saw one. I also knew I held, thanks to David, a position of immense power. I could make life miserable for her, but what would that serve? It would poison the well for Maya forever. So I did what David would have wanted me to do. I wrote a letter. "Clarissa," I wrote on a simple note card. "I am sorry for the strife. That was never David's intention, nor is it mine. The cottage is my home by his wish. I have no desire to interfere with your life or your plans for the main house. All I ask is that Maya be allowed to visit me as she always has, freely and without condition. We can share this property in peace. The choice on how we proceed from here is yours. Ted." I mailed it through Henderson's office. The response was not warm, but it was pragmatic. Her lawyer contacted Henderson. After the reality of the legal triggers losing control of Maya's substantial trust was made brutally clear, she had no room to maneuver. She could fight, spend a fortune in legal fees, and almost certainly lose while triggering the very clause she feared. Or she could accept it. She accepted it, not gracefully, but she accepted it. The for sale sign came down. The parade of strangers stopped. An uneasy, cold peace descended on Maple Crest Lane. I did not just retreat into my cottage. I reclaimed my life. I joined a senior chess group at the community center. I volunteered one afternoon a week at the local history museum, giving talks to school groups. I started reading novels again for pleasure. I tended my garden not as a chore, but as a joy. And most importantly, I made sure my door was always open for Maya. Slowly, tentatively, she started coming back, first for short supervised visits with Clarissa waiting in the car, then for longer afternoons. Then, as the months passed, she resumed her old routine of running from the bus stop to my porch. The light returned to her eyes. We didn't talk much about the will or the fight. We talked about history. We built a model of the Colosseum. We baked cookies that burned on the edges. We were healing together on the little island of safety David had anchored for us. Nearly a year after the reading of the will, Robert Henderson called again. He asked if he could stop by. He arrived at my cottage with a small wooden box under his arm. It was made of cherry with simple, clean lines. David's work, I could tell immediately. "David gave this to me about 6 months before he passed," Henderson said, placing it on my coffee table. "He asked me to hold it for you and to give it to you when the dust had settled. I believe the dust has settled." My hands were unsteady as I opened the box. Inside, there was no jewelry, no stock certificates. There was a sealed envelope with my name on it, in David's handwriting, a small, carefully wrapped model airplane, the first one we ever built together when he was maybe 7 in a photograph. The photograph was of the three of us, me a much younger David with his arm around me and a toddler Maya on my lap. We were on the porch of this very cottage, laughing. I didn't even remember it being taken. I opened the letter. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and it also means you probably needed the Henderson special clause. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry if Clarissa made things hard. I loved her, but I knew her. I knew that under pressure, her first instinct would be to control, to simplify, even if it meant cutting away things that were complicated. And I couldn't let her cut you away. You gave up your home to be near us. You gave me a childhood full of patience and history and quiet strength after Mom died. This cottage, this right to live here is the least I could give back. It's not charity, it's your due. Consider it back pay for a lifetime of being my dad. Please don't be angry with her. Be there for Maya. Tell her stories about me. Tell her about the time we got lost camping and you taught me to find the North Star. Tell her about her grandma Eleanor. You are the bridge between her past and her future now. I love you, Dad. Live well in your home. Be happy." That's all I ever wanted. Your son, David. I sat there for a long time, the letter in my hands, tears streaming down my face without a sound. It wasn't just the gift of the home. It was the gift of being seen, understood, and protected by my own child. He hadn't just anticipated a legal problem. He had anticipated my heartache, my potential loneliness, my pride. In that moment, the last of the bitterness I'd held towards Clarissa melted away. She was just a part of the complicated picture David had seen and tried to manage with love and wisdom. Today, my life is quiet, and it is my own. The cottage on Maple Crest Lane is my sanctuary. Clarissa and I have reached a civil understanding. We exchanged necessary information about Maya's scheduled school events, doctor's appointments. We say hello across the driveway. It is not warm, but it is respectful. The war is over, and a cautious truce is in place. The heart of my world. My purpose is Maya. She is 12 now, all long limbs and thoughtful questions. She comes to me for history help, for advice on friends, to just sit and talk. I have become the keeper of David's memory for her sharing stories she's too young to have known herself. I see her father in her smile, in her curiosity, and it is a comfort deeper than any words can describe. This whole journey taught me something profound. True love isn't always loud declarations. Sometimes it's a quiet clause in a legal document crafted by a son who thought years ahead. It's the action taken behind the scenes to ensure someone's safety and dignity long after you're gone. David showed me that strength isn't about shouting down your opponent. It's about having the wisdom to build an unshakable foundation long before the storm ever hits. I also learned about letting go of resentment. Holding on to anger against Clarissa would have only poisoned the peace David died trying to secure. She acted out of fear and a twisted sense of survival. I don't condone it, but I can understand it enough to share a piece of earth with her for the sake of the girl we both love. I often sit on my porch in the late afternoon, watching the light change on the garden. I think about David. I don't know what the distant future holds, but I know that today I'm safe under the roof my son built for me. And sometimes when the wind rustles through the old oak tree, I can almost hear a whisper on the air. I did it, Dad. I kept you safe. And for a father, that is everything. Now I'm curious about your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a promise that was kept in a way you never expected? Or perhaps you've had to find strength in a difficult family situation. Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up. It helps others find these narratives of real-life resilience. And if you want to join me for more journeys like this, definitely hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. If you know someone who might need to hear about finding peace in complicated times, please share this with them. Thank you for listening and for being part of this community. May you find or build your own unshakable place of peace.